If you're an adult with ADHD, you need to be in a spiritual quest. Yes, this may sound like a completely absurd claim, but in this video, I will convince you of this. Now, if you're already a spiritual person, I will give you reasons why you should lean even further into this side of your life. But if you are not a spiritual person, do not fear, my friend. There are many ways to engage in spiritual pursuits that do not require any beliefs. I certainly do not think you need to believe in any religion. I don't think you even need to believe in God or any supernatural thing at all. There are ways to adapt this to all beliefs or non beliefs, and the benefits are immense. So stick with me, and I'll show you that you need to be on this quest and how to go about doing this. First, what do I even mean by a spiritual quest? I mean that you should be aiming to be involved in the types of activities that spiritual people typically practice. I'm talking all variations from attending services to praying to meditating to going on retreats to learning the tarot cards, studying the Bible, studying the Kabbalah, attending lectures on Vedanta, doing some yoga with a spiritual bent. You could be in a yogic path with all the things, the tantric breathings and the tantric meditations. You could be doing some ecstatic dancing, sound bathing, any of these things. You could do manifestation, magic, spells, scrying with mirrors, all the woo-woo, and I mean it. I do not mean you need to be doing all of these. No, pick whatever you like, switch them around, it doesn't matter. Whatever makes sense to you, you should be engaged on these types of activities. If you're a die-hard materialist, you should be meditating. There are plenty of clean meditation techniques that skip all the religious talk. But if you are open-minded, there are a lot of weird things that will be way more fun, way more effective, and although they are still connected to their religious roots, they can be engaged in without a prerequisite belief. Oh, put hypnosis, internal family system, somatic movement therapy, pretty much all the therapies that are good for trauma treatment here as well. They share the same characteristics. You should be engaged in a lot of these activities extremely frequently. Not once a week, I mean preferably something like it daily. Yes, I know this is a bold claim, a kind of unhinged claim, but let's look closely at what these activities have in common. The most important piece is that these activities are ways to look inward. There are many ways to look inward, and each technique has its own advantages and will develop different aspects of your brain, nervous system, and body-mind connection. But every single one of them helps with ADHD. Let us begin from the most obvious, meditation. Meditation has been heavily studied in the medical literature, and it has been shown to increase the capacity of the prefrontal cortex. Now, ADHD is caused mainly by issues of dopamine and how it interacts with the brain. Dopamine is used by the prefrontal cortex to help lay down the options you have, examine them, make a choice, and move towards action. Then, the prefrontal cortex silences thoughts and ideas that could interrupt your work. And finally, the prefrontal cortex helps you stop when you should, so you can attend to other important things and rest. That's basically all the most important problems of ADHD in a nutshell. And I'm not even getting into other things the prefrontal cortex does for you. Well, meditating will strengthen your frontal lobes, which is where the prefrontal cortex is. This has been observed even with very light meditation habits of 20 minutes a day. We're talking thicker frontal lobes, much more cerebral mass, and more activity as well. Who needs this? We need this. We, the people with ADHD, can definitely use more capacity, more connections, more ways to absorb that dopamine we produce, but our brain currently absorbs too quickly or throws away. Meditation is exercise to strengthen the brain precisely in the areas where we need the most help. I know many of you know this already, and the rest of you suspect it as much. Everyone has been badgering you to meditate, haven't they? And they should badger you. Meditation is awesome, so awesome. But my point is not that you should be meditating 20 minutes a day using an app. Sure, this would definitely be good for you, no denying that. But I am saying you should be doing much more stuff, more practices, more time. You should be on a quest. Before I tell you why you should be on a quest, let's continue examining some of these activities. Let's talk about attending service, studying the Bible, the Kabbalah, listening to Vedanta lectures, and so on. Those types of activities are about contemplating the nature of reality and your role in it. It is impossible to engage with this type of material and not start to reflect on your values, your purpose, on what is right, and what you want out of life. How is that good for ADHD? Because our motivation system is extremely weak. We will not do things by routine very well. We talked about this in my previous videos about ADHD and habits. If you watch my video about how to change if you have ADHD, how to be able to stick to routines or acquire good habits, you will understand the vital importance of aligning yourself in order to change. Aligning yourself to change is a luxury for most neurotypicals. They can often change by simple repetition. There are exceptions, for example, in the case of addictions, when even neurotypicals will need alignment before change as well. But for us, alignment is a necessity. We very seldom change important things in our lives unless we convince ourselves in our core that the change is the only way to be, that we must step away from our current identity into that of a new person who doesn't have that problem anymore. I don't want to explain this again. Watch that video if you want to know the details. To the point here, what is better in order to align ourselves than the contemplation of the nature of existence and our purpose on it? That is the work we should be doing, not attempting to implement a new routine every month. We should be working on our heads, our values, and our wishes. This is how we improve our lives. Okay, but I did say to pursue prayers and spells and hypnosis and manifestation. Now, these things may have supernatural power, and I believe that all of these things can work on a causal way, though I am by no means entirely certain. My point here is another, though. You see, let us consider prayer. To pray for something, there must be something we want enough to pray for. It is the same for making spells. To make a spell, one needs to know what the spell is about. To do a hypnosis to achieve something, one needs to know what one wants. And manifestation is perhaps the most extreme of all of this, because you not only have to know what you want, but in general, manifestation involves a detailed imagination of exactly what one wants, including the feelings in that situation. This seems easy to do, but it is actually a lot harder than it seems, because to know what one wants is a very deep form of alignment. We usually know exactly what we don't want, but to know exactly what we want is a lot harder. For example, almost everyone in the world wants more money than they have, but do they know exactly how they want that money to come? What profession would bring it? We might start praying or manifesting the end of our suffering, but the exercise is really one of contemplation of our deepest wishes. We all know the adage, careful what you wish for, and we should be careful. How many wanted success only to find that the price of success was lack of freedom, family problems, and incredible stress? The act of looking inside and deciding what is important enough to deserve the effort of these activities, the consideration of our own values, and the design of the life we want is a desirable exercise for anyone, but for those of us with ADHD, it is spectacular. Why, you ask? Again, the same reasons I discussed in my previous videos. Our reward system is broken, so it is extremely difficult for us to change for the better. It is extremely difficult to establish good habits and stick to them. To do this, we need extreme levels of conviction and preferably a change of identity. And how is this done, may I ask? Well, one way is to suffer so much that the current situation becomes untenable, to hit the bottom of the pit so that there is no way to go but up. But there is another way, and it is to realize inside of us what is it that we really want, to build a conviction so unshakable that no alternative is acceptable. Well, to build a conviction without excessive suffering, one needs to contemplate one's own values. One must think deeply about the life one wants to live. Let me try to make this a bit more concrete. We all want a perfect body. Who wouldn't like to be as beautiful as possible? But do we? Do we really want that? What would you give for that? What is the price? The price to have such a body is to live the life of someone with such a body. We think of the act of acquiring that body, the workouts, the food, and decide that is too much trouble. But suppose that instead of thinking about what is necessary to get there, we thought what it is like to be in that state, to maintain that. The moment one considers that life and truly finds it desirable, the moment that type of lifestyle seems so desirable that one would live life right now like that, one would achieve that body. It is inevitable. It can take long, of course. If one wants to accelerate achieving that state, one may perhaps decide to put more effort into the exercises and food, for sure. But the true price of that life is to live like someone who has that life. That is the reality of having something we do not currently have. To have that thing, one must be willing to live as someone who has that thing. Now, I can pray for a great body, say. It seems a bit odd to pray for a perfect body, but one may pray for the strength to achieve it. Someone who does this starts to put attention on the elements of such prayer. That is a way to align. The same goes for spells. Someone who does some hypnosis to change their habits around food and exercise to achieve that body ends up paying attention to all the ways in which they are changing and will end up seeing more clearly all the benefits of changing their behavior. A vital part of change for those of us with ADHD, as I discussed in my previous video. Even better, to manifest a great body, one must imagine oneself as someone with a great body. But that is not all of manifestation. The real way to manifest is to imagine our feelings in that situation, our lives, how we behave, what we do. That is alignment at the core. All of these techniques may seem silly to people who do not understand them. In reality, they are profound ways to change attitude in fundamental ways that help change to happen. The language used is something like, God sent me this, or the world changed to give me this. But one could see the same thing in a more secular, but just as effective way. I defined and contemplated deeply how I wanted my life to be, and I accepted that. Then I paid attention to all the ways I and my environment adapted as I changed. That looks very much like establishing conviction and extracting maximum pleasure from rewards, which is exactly what one needs to do to change with ADHD. And who knows, the magic may also be real. Okay, and what about all the somatic practices, things that are all about the mind-body connection? These are helpful for two reasons. The first is rather obvious because we are often distracted away from our body because we're overwhelmed with all the thoughts, or we are distracted from our body because we are hyper-focused. One thing is for certain, we are seldom aware of what is going on there. This causes all types of problems, but long-term, it is really seriously problematic. People with ADHD have an extremely high level of comorbidity with many autoimmune conditions and chronic pain conditions. Moreover, the lack of connection with our bodies means we often eat mindlessly or do not eat when we should, so we ignore hunger cues or over-respond with the fastest option, sugar and carb-heavy things. We do not attend to injuries. We miss cues of diseases. All of this improves with mind-body connection practices. But what's even more interesting is the second reason why mind-body connection matters: intuition. We need the body to access intuition. We think of intuition as the light bulb going off and us suddenly having a thought, but the majority of intuition manifests as something we feel in our body. I'll discuss soon why intuition is so important for those of us with ADHD. Before that, let's talk about internal family systems, tarot reading, scrying, and many of the weird meditation techniques. What they have in common is that they require that we enter a somewhat meditative state where we try to focus and then we listen to our internal voices. Internal family systems is literally that. It is a mainstream form of therapy where we learn to partition our inner voices, the parts of us that make us react automatically one way or another, and we learn how to talk with them to solve our problems. The beauty of IFS is that we don't need to analyze things too deeply because most of our issues are caused by what we do automatically, by our bad habitual actions as well as our bad habitual thoughts. So the way to deal with them is not to figure out why they make sense or not, but why a part of us started acting that way, how it acts, and how to make it stop. IFS is a very powerful technique because it teaches us to access intuition in a very verbal way. Okay, but tarot is not too far afield. The cards that come out may or not be supernaturally determined, but what matters here is that a good tarot set is a very well done set of associations with archetypes, states of mind, and common human problems, so that a given spread of cards is a cue for meditation and deep consideration. The act of reading, the magic of reading, is not in the cards, it's in the intuition of the reader and the specific associations their brain is making. That skill, the skill of looking inward to call those associations, is literally strengthening the person's intuition. Similar things can be said of a lot of magical practices like scrying, glass ball staring, and other forms of divination. Divination itself, the telling of the future, is a fine endeavor because telling the future is really telling the present. But let's leave that for another video. What I recommend, though, more than divination, is the consideration of choices. What is the problem you have? What should you do? Where are you in the situation? All forms of looking inward and understanding ourselves better are valuable from a psychological perspective of helping us deal with our own shit. But I think there is more here for those of us with ADHD. It is the intuitive side of us that is aligned with something. What do you think it means to be aligned with something? What does it mean to know at the core that you should do something or that you should no longer do something? It means that you intuitively know. A strong intuition, a strong knowledge of our own core is the best weapon we have to change, to be able to improve our lives in a lasting way, to acquire any good habit and routine, and to stop doing things that harm us and start doing things that help us. This is desirable for anyone, but those of us with ADHD have little hope in any other strategy, as I discussed in my previous videos, which is why developing intuition, which means fundamentally developing strength of conviction in our own core, the things our essence wants us to do, is the most useful thing we should do. Let me put this to you on a list. If you have ADHD, there are realistically only 4 ways to change your behavior in any lasting way to improve your life. The first one is luck. Sometimes you change your behavior and you immediately prefer the new lifestyle and find it easy to stick to it. Sometimes the sky opens and the waters part. This method, unfortunately, does not depend on us very much. We can't count on it. The second method is to establish rewards to repeat action until the inherent rewards become obvious or we change our identity. If you have ADHD, this requires months, perhaps years of sustained action. It is very hard to establish rewards that can guarantee this type of consistency. The third way is to align ourselves first, to build such a strong conviction of the need of change that the conviction alone can sustain us for years until our identity is so changed and the rewards so obvious that the new way is the easiest way to be. Unfortunately, this usually only happens after we have suffered a great deal. This level of conviction is normally born of fear, disgust, or shame. I would like to be able to change without the need of so much suffering. The question is, how does one build strong conviction? How does one build alignment without excessive suffering? There is a way, the fourth way, which is to know one's core. There are a lot of ways to put this in religious and esoteric terms. People say they know the will of God, or it is their soul's plan, or their life's mission. It does not matter how you say it, it is an idea that one must be a certain way. But importantly, it is not an intellectual idea. It is something that is felt. It is rather hard to describe this because it is not a proper feeling. At the essence, it is a form of knowing, a type of knowing that one can convey, but nobody else can really see. One knows that one knows, and this is it. There is a Sanskrit word for it, and it is called jnana. When you have jnana, you change. Jnana is internal alignment to something. A person who knows what they must do, does it. For example, how many of us would not do something for us, but would do it in a heartbeat for our children? How many sacrifices are we willing to make for our children? Many of us, if not most of us parents, would die for our children. Why? Because you know that this is something you must do, but you don't know it as an intellectual idea. You have internalized this in your core. In fact, as an intellectual idea, it is a rather debatable one. Should we die for our children? What are the parameters? Does the age of the child matter? Do the prospects of the child matter? And yet, for most of us, this is not up for debate. Our motivation to die to save our own children is infinite. You see, nobody has a motivation problem where jnana is concerned. Jnana gives us that strength we build when we had it, when we cannot withstand the suffering any longer and we decide to pay any price to get out of a problem. Say, to get out of an addiction, to get out of an abusive relationship, to get out of debt, to get out of terrible health. This strength comes from jnana. The extreme suffering taught us something beyond our reasoning. Everyone knows they should get out of an addiction. They know it intellectually, but the suffering teaches us the true knowledge. The inner knowledge of how that thing harms us, not in theory, but in reality. It can take years to learn this way, and some people never do. But if one does learn, if one gets jnana, the motivation is not a problem anymore. Well, there are ways to get jnana without so much suffering, without reaching rock bottom, which is to learn to listen to and trust the voices of our intuition. Pretty much all the esoteric and religious practices work precisely with that. You can do things directly by doing practices aimed precisely at the third eye, But all of the things I mentioned above and many more strengthen your intuitive side one way or another. They teach you to watch for subtle things, to perceive them, and ultimately to rely on them. To know thyself truly is the best way to overcome the issue those of us with ADHD so often have, that life feels so hard. Those that have abundant access to dopamine do not need to contend as strongly with whether they are living the right life or not. They do not have to struggle as much to change, though to some degree they too have difficulties. However, those of us with ADHD cannot rely on internal rewards at all. Our willpower is the resource we use, and it is a highly exhaustible resource. Unless, and here is the very powerful exception, unless we are aligned. Then there are no limits to our willpower. Let me repeat this. Where there is jnana, there are no limits to willpower. It doesn't even feel like willpower. It is simply something you do. Jnana allows action without suffering, and this is what we want. Those of us who suffer to act need that. I said at the beginning that you should be on a quest. I say specifically a quest because I think this is so important that you should spend a lot of your time and energy on spiritual and esoteric endeavors. But I also say a quest because, well, we do have ADHD. If you were a neurotypical person, I would simply say, go do third eye meditation practices to strengthen your intuition. But we will not do that. And the fun thing is that you don't have to. You don't need to do a single practice for a long time because all of these practices help us one way or another. You should be trying out lots of these things, lots of them. You should be searching around for what you connect with. And when you do connect with something, you should hyper-focus on it. And when the hyper-focus is gone, you should move on to the next thing without guilt, provided you stay in the general pursuit. The spiritual path is not like other things. You can jump around. The wild seeking is a way to do this. It is a type of path. As with everything else in a world of neurotypicals, we hear constantly of the necessity of consistency. And indeed, consistency is fundamental for many endeavors in life, but not for the spiritual path. Consistency is the best path for some. You could meditate for 40 years. You could go to an ashram and do vipassana meditation for decades. But the beauty of spirituality, of knowing yourself, and of developing these abilities is that there are other ways. There really are other ways. Being hypersensitive, as we usually are, is an advantage here. And some people who cannot do basic practices can ace advanced practices. Nothing is linear when spirituality is concerned. There is no such thing as rewards that must be proportional to effort, much less to dedication. Now, to be clear, rewards are not proportional to consistent effort in the same activity, but rewards are proportional to the amount and intensity of the seeking. So go seek. In the worst case scenario, you get practice on intuition, higher alignment, and ability to change. In the best case scenario, there is indeed some magic to this. I even have reasons to believe it. I wish you all the best in this path, and I hope to see you soon in my next video.